Welcome to the Anxiety Attic, where I make self-help videos for anxiety disorders and phobias. Today I'm going to be talking about avoidance. I'm going to tell you about some of the problems avoidance can cause. I'm also going to tell you why avoidance always fails. I also have some real-life stories that I think you might find interesting.
Since the beginning of time, we've been avoiding what we fear. But in modern times, even though life is a lot less dangerous, we still have avoidance behaviours. Avoidance behaviours are common in most anxiety disorders and phobias, but can also play a role in stress. To understand the problem with avoidance, we must go back to our Stone Age man. He avoids the tiger because he knows it's dangerous. His brain learns from this avoidance and creates the fight or flight response whenever he sees a tiger. But to be extra safe, the brain also learns to make associations. The area where he saw the tiger may invoke the fight or flight response. Seeing other large animals with big teeth will cause his heart to race, muscles to tense, and breathing to become faster. This reaction was perfect for helping mankind survive.
The problem is that although the world around us has become much less dangerous, the way our brain works has not significantly changed, and that's why so many people in modern times suffer from stress and anxiety. Instead of avoiding lions, we now avoid less dangerous situations, like confronting a difficult colleague, making a speech, or performing a task that we don't feel confident about. People who suffer panic attacks will avoid anywhere they fear having a panic attack. People who suffer from social anxiety will avoid social situations. People who suffer health anxiety might avoid exercising for fear of a heart attack.
But the brain still works the same way. Avoidance increases the fear, and the more you avoid something, the more likely it is to create the fight or flight response. And just like the caveman's brain, the modern anxious brain generalizes that fear to other things, until something that is completely benign can create the same physiological response as being attacked by a tiger.
So that's the problem with avoidance. It increases fear, anxiety and stress. But why did I say avoidance always fails? To explain that, I'm going to tell you a true story, but I'll change some minor details for confidentiality reasons.
Steve had always been squeamish. The sight of blood made him feel physically sick and dizzy, so he always avoided it. If there was blood or injury on the TV, he would turn it off. If one of his children fell over and cut their knee, he would let his wife deal with it. All this avoidance made his blood phobia worse. One day he bumped into an old friend. Before he could stop him, the friend explained in graphic detail an operation he had recently had. The next thing he knew, Steve was lying on the ground. He had fainted. Steve's avoidance had caused his fear to generalize, so that even the mention of blood could cause this dramatic response. By the way, blood phobia is one of the few phobias where fainting is actually quite common. Steve was very embarrassed and worried about fainting in public again. He didn't leave his house for weeks, and when he did try to leave the house, he had a panic attack and immediately returned. Steve very quickly went from being a sociable person who loved going out to a recluse who never left the house. Steve had developed panic disorder and agoraphobia. Now he was not only avoiding blood, he was avoiding everything.
I witnessed this true story many years ago, before I had trained in counselling, so I couldn't help Steve. However, I put Steve in touch with somebody I knew who could. This early intervention was key, and Steve made a full recovery. In fact, Steve's amazing recovery was one of the things that inspired me to later train in counselling myself. This story shows how damaging avoidance can be. And the thing about avoidance is that you will inevitably have to face what you fear at some time in your life.
If you avoid leaving your house because of panic attacks, you can guarantee that one day you will have to leave your house. For example, there could be a medical emergency. If you avoid speaking in front of people due to social anxiety, you can guarantee that one day you will have to.
So what can you do if you can't avoid what you fear forever? To answer that, I'm going to tell you another true story. Again, I'm going to change some minor details for confidentiality reasons.
Not long after I finished my training, a young lady called Jane came to see me. Like Steve, Jane also had a blood phobia. Jane wanted to have children and knew that this phobia could cause problems, so she was very keen to get rid of it. Over the next few appointments, I took Jane through a desensitization process. I used hypnosis to help her relax, and then gradually exposed her to images of blood and injury. We started off with some black and white pictures of mild injuries, and eventually some videos showing real blood. For the final test, I actually drew my own blood using a sterile blood testing kit. Jane experienced no dizziness, no nausea, no racing heart, and no fear. Jane was amazed and very pleased. Jane went on to have children, and many years later, Jane is still free of her blood phobia. So the lesson here is to face your fear on your terms, rather than have to face it when you least expect it and are totally unprepared for it.
Systematic desensitization, also called exposure therapy, is something I teach in my videos for most anxiety disorders. If you'd like to learn about systematic desensitization for panic attacks, then I recommend you watch this video here. I mentioned earlier in my video fainting, and I know that's something that a lot of people worry about. So if you'd like to learn about panic attacks and fainting, then I recommend you watch this video here.